Now on BBC One, analysis and results from today's local elections, presented by David Dimbleby.
Good evening and welcome to our coverage of today's local elections in England. We'll be bringing you the results from 150 councils, 3,000 council seats in all. Votes which will decide who runs local government, emasculated though many people believe it to be, but which will also give us the last big test of voter opinion this side of the general election. There were no elections bar a couple of by-elections in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland or in London, but most of the rest of England had a chance to vote. The big metropolitan councils, the district councils, all of those electing a third of their councillors, and some of the new single unitary authorities. Most of these seats last fought in 1992, and the results so far suggest a slight upturn for the Tories since 95, but there are going to be a lot of seats lost by them and gains from Labour and the Liberal Democrats. And we've been counting the first results in actual wards around the country as they come in to assess the performance of the three main parties. Peter Snow will keep us up to date with that and has the preliminary results now. Peter.
David, we have a quarter of these 3,000 wards we've called key wards, wards in which there's a pattern of political representation that we reckon will give us a pretty fair representation of what all the wards will come out with at the end of the night. So these key wards have been counting in the last hour or so, and we've got now something like 100 plus, 100, and they're going up all the time, even as I watch, 165 wards declared, over 280,000 votes in those key wards, and as a result of those counts, we can average the change in the share of the vote on that record-breaking election last year for Labour and the worst ever for the Conservatives. So here's the change from last year's record breaker. The Tories appear to have picked themselves up off the floor, if this follows itself right through the night, 3% up on where they were last year in 95. Labour Party 3% down on their best ever last year, and no change for the Liberal Democrats. Now, another change, the change on 1992 when these seats were last elected. The change that, of course, really counts as far as the councillors themselves are concerned. And here is the change on the local elections in 1992 when these seats were last elected. A huge increase of 13% for Labour on a very bad election then for Labour, a drop of 17% for the Conservatives on what then was the best ever for the Tories in 1992, and a small advance for the Liberal Democrats. Now, on the basis of those changes, we calculate the estimation of the national share of the vote, what it would have been all over the country if the pattern of voting in these key wards had been reflected everywhere. And our projection of the national share of the vote is Labour on 43%, rather less than what the polls are suggesting Labour is standing at, 28% for the Tories, that small improvement on where they were in the elections last year, but way, of course, down on the general election, way down 92, and 24% the Liberal Democrats, 24% and 5% the others. David.
And we'll be looking at various parts of the country, of course, these councils where people have gained and lost seats which matter very much to them, though we talk also about the national share of the vote. Places where people have fought to gain power, like the Conservatives in Basildon. It was once their proudest boast that they'd managed to convert Basildon, and where tonight it looks as though that may have come to an end. Jeremy Vine is in Basildon. Jeremy, what's the news from Basildon tonight?
Yes, it's all over for the Conservatives here, David, because they have 14 seats they're defending tonight, out of 15 in total that are up for grabs, and 14 is all they had on the council. They've been losing them one after the other. It was feared they could actually be wiped out completely. In fact, they've kept one of their seats. Lib Dems have taken 2 seats from the Conservatives, and Labour so far have 8 Conservative seats. So they now have, Labour now have control of Basildon. And just an interesting point, bearing out Peter Snow's analysis there of these statistics, we put into our pocket calculator here some of the votes of the first seats to come in, and we see that there's been a big drop for the Conservatives since 1992, about 34%. But since last year, their vote is up 2.5%, 3%. So it suggests that they've at least bottomed out, but it hasn't saved them here tonight in Basildon.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We'll come back to you later on. Council by council, I say, we'll be giving the results on the bottom of the screen here as we go through, so we should get all 150 there. Trafford, Labour gain from no overall control. No overall control being when none of the parties has a majority over all the other parties and they have to trade to keep government going. Now, we'll also be going to Conservative Party headquarters. We hope to be speaking to Michael Heseltine, Deputy Prime Minister, and also to the chairman of the party, Dr. Brian Mawhinney. We'll be in Macclesfield in Cheshire, one of the only 4 councils tonight that are being voted on tonight that are still in Conservative hands, which they feared they might lose. Nick Robinson is in Macclesfield. Nick, what do you have to tell us?
Well, not only is it one of the only 4 Tory councils up, it is, of course, the only Tory council left in the north. And the news tonight is it looks set to remain that way. The Tories had to lose 4 seats if they were going to lose control. They lost 1 to Labour, but miraculously, they've actually won 1 back from the Liberal Democrats. And the opposition are not looking at all confident about making the gains they need. So I think the Tories can be confident they'll be holding on to Mac.
OK, Nick, thanks very much indeed. We'll join you again later on as well. Now we'll be in the Prime Minister's home council of Huntingdonshire. It'd be dire for them if they lost their majority of 9 in Huntingdonshire. We'll be at Labour headquarters in London for reaction from the Labour leadership. Will tonight be evidence that they are down there a government in waiting? And as I say, we'll be in Basel, and again we'll be going to Sheffield, where desperate rows have been going on about Labour's financial prudence, but where the Tories could disappear from sight, and where the Liberal Democrats are thinking they may have done rather well tonight. Paddy Ashdown will talk to us from the Liberal Democrat headquarters. Liberal Democrats are usually able to claim a better result locally than the national opinion polls suggest they have nationally. And we'll be going down to Wokingham, a Liberal Democrat target, prosperous part of the country. John Redwood, Major's challenger for the leadership, is its local MP. So that's out and about in the country. We'll be in other places too. Now here in the studio, as ever, the wisdom of Professor Anthony King of Essex University and the close-to-the-ground ear of Robin Oakley, the BBC's political editor, will be interpreting what's been going on. What were you looking for tonight, Tony?
Well, what it looks as though is happening is that it's going to be a slight improvement for the Conservatives compared with last year, but it is nevertheless going to be one of the Tories' worst ever years in local government.
And Robin Oakley, what can the Tories do about it if it is like that?
There's nothing much they can do except hope that the feel-good factor of better economic statistics over the next year can turn things for them. What they're looking for, above all else, is some evidence that at long, long last they have bottomed out. All through this Parliament, they've been losing parliamentary by-elections, they've been doing badly in European elections, each round of local elections. The only thing that will give the Tories any joy tonight, and they know there can't be much joy, is the theory that they have at least hit rock bottom. They've got some small improvement since last year, which will give them a shred of hope for the general election.
And no lingering thoughts of changing the leader?
I don't think we're going to see a change of leader almost whatever the results tonight.
OK. And among the backup team who are crunching the results back here is Peter Kellner, who's also looking to see patterns in the votes that have been cast and foretelling what will come out at the end of the night. Peter, we've had how many results in so far have you had?
We've had something like now 300 of our key wards in, David, and I must say on the basis of these results, if I were a Conservative MP with a majority of 10,000, I'd feel slightly happier tonight about the prospects of holding onto my seat. But if I were a Conservative cabinet minister, I wouldn't think that much from these results about holding onto my red box.
So you think they've turned the corner a little bit, but they haven't done enough to demonstrate that they can take a majority of the general election in a year's time?
They needed to pick up something like 15 points on last year to win a general election.
What do you
they
say,
picked up about maybe 3 of those 15
what
points.
What do you say to what Michael Heseltine was saying earlier on another channel, BBC 2 that is, not an entirely other channel, that none of this matters at all because it's proven time and time again you can do badly in the local elections before a general election and win the general election?
Well, that wasn't the view the Conservatives took in May 1983 or May 1987. On both occasions, they used the local results, which were very good for the Conservatives, to decide to call a general election. They were right to do so.
Well, of course,
whenever a party does badly, they say the results don't matter. Whenever a party does well, they say the results do matter. That's part of the pageant of local election nights. We have it every year.
Well, this general election is inescapable in 12 months from now, and to comment on how they see the results, we have with us Nick Harvey from the Liberal Democrats, who's their campaigns manager, Frank Dobson, Shadow Environment spokesman for Labour, William Hague, Secretary of State for Wales, and he must be sick of hearing it, but the youngest cabinet minister since Harold Wilson. I don't know whether what that tells us about anything, but anyway. Nick Harvey, starting with you, you've got an idea of what the popular vote is going to be. It would demonstrate or suggest, wouldn't it, that it's a two-horse race, this next general election, between Labour and the Tories, and really your game's up.
No, far from it. What it shows is, in fact, a 10% swing from the Tories to the Liberal Democrats, and it would imply that we would get 50 more seats at the next election. So, in fact, it's very good news for us. We're batting on a tough wicket tonight, and if we can do well even on this round of local elections, then it's really very encouraging.
But that wasn't your game. Your game was to be the little wedge, wasn't it, between Labour and the opposition benches that allowed them to go onto the government benches. I mean, if they're going to have a good result, you're going to be nowhere.
Well, we have to remember where these council elections are starting from. In 1992, the Tories had a spectacularly good result. Labour did appallingly badly. The Liberal Democrats did quite well. So it's bound to be the case that tonight's night is going to be Labour's. They would have to gain 366 seats just to be back where they were in the first place. So clearly at the end of tonight, Labour are going to emerge with the greatest number of seat gains, but on the evidence so far, it'll be a good night for the Liberal Democrats. We've gained Tunbridge Wells, North Somerset. We look as if we're going to gain Wokingham, and I think that we will consolidate our position as the second party in local government, having overtaken the Conservatives last year.
Frank Dobson, is there a cloud in your clear blue sky?
No, there isn't at all.
Clear pink sky or red sky, I suppose.
What I've been saying all along, whatever your experts have been saying, is that last year there were 12,000 seats up. The Tories lost 2,000, 1 in 6. This year there are 3,000 seats up. It looks as though they're going to lose about 500. That's 1 in 6. And they're going to do just about as badly as they did last year. And my own view has always been that they might do a little bit better and we might do a little bit worse, as I've been saying to various people. But these are brilliant results. What you've got to remember is that last year's results for the Tories were appalling. They were the equivalent of Frank Bruno's performance against Mike Tyson. You know, if the Tories are saying, well, we'll have another go at Mike Tyson and we'll last about a minute and a half longer, that's the reasonable comparison. Probably the best and most sensible comparison, I think, really, is to go back to 1991, a year before the last general election, when the Labour Party and the Tories were level pegging in the opinion polls and level pegging on the turnout in the election. And our position is a massive improvement on that. And this could be literally a year before the next general election.
Well, it couldn't be much more.
Certainly, well, unless they introduce some measure to postpone the election.
William Hague, just looking at the raw figures that Peter Snow had on the screen a moment ago, it is a prodigious gap between you at 28% and Labour at 43%, with an election only 12 months away, isn't it?
Well, we've only had a few results so far. It's a bit early to start making predictions. We've had some results which show us doing a bit better than last year, and so some good results there from Macclesfield, it looks like. I think it's worth bearing in mind a couple of things here. First of all, that we are defending seats mainly that were last contested in 1992. And so even if we had an equality of votes in this election between the Labour and Conservative parties, we would lose several hundred seats. We need to see it in that perspective.
But it's the wipeout of the Tories that must be worrying you. I mean, we've just had news that you've lost all your seats in Manchester, all your Salford seats, all your Oxford seats. I mean, it's this disappearance of Tory councillors that must be alarming you, isn't it?
But these are the seats that were last fought in 1992. What we saw, Frank was talking about the local elections the year before the 92 general election. If you look at the local elections in 1986, we lost over 700 seats. We got less than 30% of the national vote. A year later, we won the general election with an overall majority of 100. So you can extrapolate much too much and much too far over the.
In 1986.
Well, we got
32%.
They've given you dumb chairs.
Everybody has different figures.
They've given you dumb chairs.
My figure is 29.7% of the vote in that election. Whatever the precise figure is, we took a pasting in those local elections, and we went on to thrash these characters overwhelmingly.
I'm going to stop you there because we now want to go out to the regions. For time to time tonight, we'll bring you the results in more detail from those parts of the country that voted today.
Well, here in the southeast, the Conservatives control just 3 councils voting tonight: Wokingham, Runnymede and Broxbourne. Already, it appears they've been ousted in Runnymede. Labour have already taken Basildon from no overall control and have done the same in Hertsmere. And in once true blue Tunbridge Wells, the Liberal Democrats now run the council.
Good. Well, back here, let's have a look. As I say, we'll be going out for rather longer than that brief moment. We'll be going out for 10 minutes or so at the hour, so you can get a full picture from the parts of Britain that voted. But let's have a look now at the results that we've had in so far. We've had 22 councils in. That means we've got 128 to go. And so far, Labour have taken control of 3. The Liberal Democrats up 1, and no overall control has dropped 4. So Lib Dems and Labour both shift from no overall control to take control of those 3 and 1 councils that they've gained. Councillors, 3,000 or so to come over the night, and you heard what they were saying a moment ago about the Tories losing perhaps 500 or so. Labour at present are up 53, and the total tonight so far is 261. The Liberal Democrats are up 4, the Conservatives are down 52, Independents down 4. And these are the places where Labour have gained control: Basildon, which we were hearing from a moment ago, Trafford and Hertsmere, and Labour holds in Lincoln, Sunderland, Worcester, Barnsley, Harlow, Thurrock, no surprises in those, and in South Tyneside, Wigan, Amber Valley, Newcastle, Bassetlaw, Rossendale. Liberal Democrat gains Tunbridge Wells and North Somerset, with a by-election that was held tonight, which gave them control of North Somerset. And Liberal Democrats hold on to Congleton, Hereford and Craven. John Prescott, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, says it's beginning to look very, very good. And Michael Heseltine saying it looks as though the Tory recovery, which we've talking about, has been maintained. So there you have a proper polarisation, just what we need. Tony King, a brief comment.
A very brief comment, but I think a very important one. A lot of nonsense has been talked about the results of local elections just before the last few general elections. The fact is, before the 1983 general election, the Tories were way ahead in the local elections. In 1986 and in 1991, the major parties were pretty well level pegging. The situation now on May the 2nd, 1996 is very different indeed from what it was before any of the previous 3 Tory victories.
Okay, let's go up to Solihull. And John Pienaar, I think, is there. John, what has happened in Solihull? Because this was a curious position.
The Conservatives have lost their last tentative fingertip hold on power in their last Metropolitan District Council. On paper, the council here was in no overall control. In practice, it was in Conservative control with the help of a small group of ratepayers and independents. That control has gone, and we've moved to a situation where there will be power sharing. The Liberal Democrats and Labour will come in and carve up the councils between them. 2 seats have gone to the Liberal Democrats, 1's gone to Labour, and the leader of the Conservative group is clinging to office in the count behind me on a recount. The Liberal Democrats hope there to push him aside too.
John, what do you hear up there from the Conservatives about why this has happened?
Well, mainly they're blaming national trends and a disillusionment, unhappiness with the government at Westminster for the suffering that they're going through here. There have been some local issues, the loss of hospital facilities in one part of the borough, but mainly the complaint is that what they're experiencing is a reaction against the government at Westminster.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to Huntingdon, or Huntingdonshire. I don't know which way they call it Huntingdonshire. I'm told by some people it should probably be called Huntingdon, but no doubt that's a local battle that's been sorted out. Fiona Bruce, good evening. What's going on in Huntingdon? Are the Tories going to be embarrassed in John Major's heartland or not?
I suspect not, David. In fact, a rather unusual sight here. What you're seeing is some rather happy Tory faces. They needed to lose 5 seats if the council was going to get no overall control. In fact, we had 7 results in, 7 Conservative 6 Conservative holds, 1 Conservative gain, in fact. Now, 3 of those seats were vulnerable. The Lib Dems hoped to pick up at least 2 of them, and they haven't. In fact, the Lib Dems have now effectively conceded defeat. And what the Conservatives are saying is that they've bottomed out, and this is the way back, and they're now fighting back, and this is the recovery.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later on. Let's go to Runnymede and join Krishna Gurumurthy. Runnymede is sort of safe Tory, or ought to be, isn't it? A prosperous part, southwest of London, roughly.
Well, it should be safe, Conservative, David, but it isn't anymore, because with half of the seats declared, it looks like the Conservatives have lost control of the council. They needed to lose 2 seats in order for the council to go to no overall control, and they have done. There's still a very slim chance that they could claw 1 back from Labour, but it is a very slim chance. And when you say it's true blue, even in Virginia Water, one of the richest places in the country, Labour tripled their vote.
Labour tripled their vote. And
That's right.
Do you know why this is happening?
Well, it's the same picture I think we're seeing across the country. People are voting on national issues. There were some local issues. The M25 is the big question in this area. But people wanted to send a message to the government, and it looks like they have.
OK, thank you very much. Mrs. Thatcher's favourite poem was said to be the Kipling poem about Runnymede that had the line, "What say the reeds at Runnymede?" which is a devastating answer tonight. Let's have a look at the...
They return a Tory with a majority of 23,000.
Well,
but they've lost control of the council.
Well, fine, but that's a point against yourself, because that's exactly the danger that Michael Heseltine was talking about.
No, it's not. It's an indication that even in that they were in control of 4 seats when this evening started. They've lost Runnymede, which is one of the safest strongholds you can possibly imagine, and they're running scared in Broxbourne as well. We never had a hope in hell of winning Huntingdon or Macclesfield, but there's a chance in Broxbourne, and of the Tories losing control.
Our information actually is that they look as if they're OK in Broxbourne.
Well, they may be, but
we'll
they've lost control in Runnymede, so your chap tells us.
All right, let's have a look at the councils that are at risk and how they're going to fall, Peter, can we?
The collapse of the Conservatives in local government over the last 20 years or so. First of all, here are the blue town halls, 1979, this is when Margaret Thatcher came to power. Of the councils being elected today, all these councils which have been contested this time, 150 or so, 79, more than half, were blue Conservative held in 1979. Now that has dwindled away, melted away over the last couple of decades to just 4. There's Macclesfield, there's Runnymede, which they appear to have lost, there's Broxbourne, and there's Huntingdonshire there. So down to 4 councils in this election being contested today. They've got a few more which aren't being contested this time. Councillors. Now we look at all the councils all over the country, regions, districts, London boroughs and so on. Go back to 1975 after the last reorganisation. Labour, 2,700 odd councillors ahead. Liberal Democrats hardly appearing down here at the bottom with 1,500 odd. And now as you go forward, you see the Tories in 1978, their record year, picking up half the councillors in the entire country, 12,500 councillors. Labour Party on 6,500, Liberal Democrats still not really there at the bottom with 850. But as time goes on, through the 80s and 90s, here we are in 1992, the last local election when the Tories really did quite well. 8,350 was actually their best ever in terms of share of the vote, but they did quite well in terms of councillors. 9,050 just behind the Labour Party. And here are the Liberal Democrats beginning to pick up that strength in local government, which has become a trend since then. And then through the 90s, 1995, after the last election, and with the by-election since the last local election last year, Labour Party on 10,800, the Liberal Democrats on 5,050 councillors, pushing the Tories for the first time, look at that collapse there, into the 3rd place in local government. So that's the position before today's election. David.
Thanks, Peter. Well, William Hague, does that worry you, that picture? Or do you shrug your shoulders and say, doesn't make any difference?
No, I would prefer to see a very different picture. But I think over the coming year in politics, we're going to see an extremely different picture. I think the government has a very strong case to put to the country. The Labour Party are going to have very serious difficulties every time they come up with a specific policy, as they've found on child benefit in the last couple of weeks, and we mustn't extrapolate from that to a general election.
So what would you look to yourself? For comfort, I mean.
Oh, I'm not making any predictions about the result. I'm pleased to see our vote higher than last year on the results that we've had so far, up 2.5 or 3%. Obviously, I would like that to be maintained, but we'll see how it goes through the evening.
Peter, just before we go on with this, can we have a look at the kind of benchmarks that politicians might use tonight when they're trying to assess how well they've done?
Yes, we can, David.
And see which of the benchmarks each of them is prepared to take.
That's right. I mean, what should we compare this local election share with? Now, The Tories, and that's why we've coloured the screen a bit blue, a little bit blue blush about the screen, you'll notice here, will no doubt want to compare, as we've heard many of them doing already tonight, with the local elections in 1995. There's that all-time Conservative low in the local elections last year, and they may say, we're up 3%, 28% now. We've seen an increase in our share of the vote, projected share of the vote. Look at Labour, they're down, they might say, by 3% from last year, and the Liberal Democrats not doing very much down there at the bottom, 24%, 24%, no change. The Labour Party, on the other hand, let's just make the screen go nice and red for them. They may say, and we've heard Frank Dobson say this already, in the local elections in 1992, the Tories did frightfully well, 45%, best ever. And they've dropped right down. Look at the collapse of Tories in local government, right down 28% now in the locals in 1996, our estimated projected share of the vote. Whereas Labour shot up from 30 to 43, terrific, a Labour triumph. The Liberal Democrats, 19% in 1992, 24%, an increase for them, an improvement for the Liberal Democrats of 5% since then. The comparison, of course, that many people want to make is the comparison with the general election in April 92. 43% the Tories had then, a little bit less than they had in the local elections a month later, and they've declined, as of course we know, to 28% now. The Labour Party, 35% in the general election, up to 43% now. And the Liberal Democrats, down, way down there at the bottom at 18%, up to 24% now. That perhaps is the real comparison we ought to make in terms of share of the vote, because that's the way the general election looked, and that's the way these local elections look. One point to make about the last time we had a general election, and this is quite a good point for the Tories, in 1991, something like perhaps the same amount of time before the last general election that these local elections are now, the Tories were on 35%. They actually climbed from 35 to 43 between the local elections in May 91 and the general election of April 92. So they may look for quite an advance in their vote this time, whereas Labour only dropped a tiny bit from 36 to 35%, and the Liberal Democrats didn't do very much down there. So perhaps the comparison we should be making is with the 35% the Conservatives had in the local elections just before the last general election, and the 28% the Tories have now in this local election, if our projected share is right. A pretty low base from which to advance, even if they get the 8% odd increase that they got in 1991 to 1992. So it's a complicated picture, all sorts of comparisons to make, but perhaps the one that really counts is the one with the Tories' success in 92, the general election, and the local elections that followed. Well, they have improved a little bit since last year.
Would you accept that, William Hague? The left-hand figure there, 36, 35 in the 91, as opposed to 96, 43 and 28?
Oh, I accept those are the figures from that election. They show the huge variation that you get from year to year. You see there an 8% change in 1 year between the local elections and the general election. You see a 20% change over 3 years in the course of this Parliament. There is tremendous fluidity in this electorate.
Robin Oakley,
and we're going to see more of that in the next year.
You're expressing dissent, Robin Oakley.
Well, not dissent with that, but I'd be interested to hear what William Hague feels about whether his government is suffering from what it has done to local government. You were talking earlier about the emasculation of local government, the fact that under this government, with capping and other measures that have been taken, local government does not have the degree of autonomy and control that it used to have, and therefore people feel perhaps that they're voting for something less important in local government elections now, and are perhaps more inclined to treat them in the way that they treat parliamentary by-elections and the way they treat opinion polls as a way of punishing the government.
But that would have applied in 1991, wouldn't it, in that case?
It would have applied then.
So you go for the 91 version, that this is a dangerous gap that they have now?
Oh, certainly. They've got an enormous gap to make up.
I certainly think that people treat local elections to a large extent as they treat opinion polls. And I was watching this evening on an earlier programme, people saying how they'd voted today, and they were saying we were making a protest vote, and so on. And they certainly do that. But there is still a difference between the performance of authorities in the control of the different parties.
OK, well, look, we've still got this up here. Nick Harvey, what do you make of that? Well, there you are, going along at the bottom, 21, 18 in the general, 19 in the 92 locals, 24 in 95, 24 now.
Yeah, well, whichever way you care to look at it, it's good news for us and implies that we're going to make big gains at the general election. And
depends what you call good news. I mean,
well, if we're going to get a swing of 6% in the course of the parliamentary period, we're going to come back with far more MPs in the next Parliament than we did at the last. I mean, if the Tories are heading for a meltdown, we could end up as the official opposition. I mean, you know, that's perhaps a little far-fetched, but I think perhaps the significant point that William Hague wasn't addressing is the fact that the loss of all those councillors at a community level means that the Conservatives haven't got those people who were pillars of the local community, who were the engine room of the local Tory parties, who go out there and do the work for them. They have lost 5,000 or 6,000 of their key local networkers who just simply are not there anymore. And I think that that is what's going to catch up with them come general election day. It's not just a numbers game. There's actually a real people story there as well.
Frank, forgive me if I don't come to you straight away, because we've got a slight problem down at Labour headquarters, which is a power cut. I just want to go, I hope we'll catch up with them in a moment.
Privatised electricity plot.
Let's go to Derby, though, for a moment. Michael Crick, what's the story in Derby tonight? What's happened there?
Well, this is one of the new unitary authorities, so they're actually electing a whole new council here, 44 seats, and the count's going very slowly, but it looks as if the Conservatives are going to do pretty badly. I mean, they're saying privately that more than 2 seats here would be a bonus. There's an element, of course, of lowering our expectations here, but certainly it looks as if Labour's going to do extremely well, win round about 40 of those 44 seats. And that's a pretty astonishing picture, given that only 2 years ago the Conservatives were actually running the council here, albeit on the mayor's casting vote.
OK, and let's go to Sheffield. Gordon Brewer in Sheffield. We've still got Michael Crick. Gordon Brewer. Now, Sheffield, Labour had some difficulties there, didn't they, on the ground? How has that affected the vote tonight?
Well, what's happened here, basically, the main story, I suppose, is that the Conservatives have been virtually eliminated. They were down to 4 seats in 1995. They've lost 3 of those 4. The only person who's hung on is the Lord Mayor, who's a very popular figure here, and the thinking is that on the basis of a personal vote, he's managed to hold on. There's an interesting subplot, though. The Liberal Democrats, who in Sheffield have positioned themselves rather as a sort of working-class alternative to Labour in power, they've made 4 more gains from Labour, so they are doing rather well here. They had 25 seats in the council. They're now considerably up on that.
Was that because of the trouble or allegations of bad financial management by Labour in Sheffield?
Yes, not necessarily bad financial management. One of the arguments the Liberal Democrats have been making very strongly is to say to people that Sheffield built all sorts of grandiose projects, sports centres, etc., and that they should have paid more attention to the local communities. And what the Liberal Democrats have done here is to take the national Lib Dem idea of street politics and apply it to very working class council estates in inner city areas. And it seems to be working for them.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Now we're joined, I hope, by the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Heseltine, from the Conservative Party headquarters. Good evening, Mr Heseltine. You'll have heard the figures Peter Snow gave of the state of things as far as the Tory party is concerned, a vote of 28% and Labour on 43%. Quite unlike what happened before previous general elections. What can the Tories do in these circumstances?
Well, I think that we take account of the fact that there's been a significant improvement in Conservative support since this time in the last local government elections. Not dramatic, but as we had hoped, a significant improvement. What that shows is that the confidence of the electorate is returning. It shows that the very attractive economic circumstances are beginning to come through into people's perceptions of their own well-being. And we have another 12 months. All my conviction tells me that that is sufficient time for 2 things to happen. People to realize that the benefits are flowing because we took the difficult decisions. Secondly, for the Labour Party to come under scrutiny. And when that happens and their policies are subjected to the detailed inquiry, people will find that Labour is, as it always was, a high-tax, centralising, trade union interested party. Nothing has changed.
But that's the argument you tried using in the local elections. You went around with your cans of baked beans saying that that band-D council tax are much higher.
Isn't it interesting how low the turnout is? Here you have a Labour Party that has relaunched itself, has a brand new image of a leader, says it's all about new ideas, new people, new image, new vision, and actually very few people are prepared to go and support it. It's perfectly true that our support has stayed at home. I think that is absolutely right. But you expect that of a government that's had to take tough decisions. What it doesn't show in any enthusiasm is a resurgence of Labour support.
Can you think of an election 1 year before a general election where you've been at 28 and Labour at 43 and you've gone through to victory? Because I can't.
No, I think that is right, but on the other hand, if I said to you, can you think of a government in the world that managed to hang on in the teeth of the recession we went through, you can't think of one either, except Chancellor Cole, who hung on by 1 vote, and John Major, who got the largest vote in the history of the Conservative Party. So the fact is that we have proved that we have the tenacity to win, and we've also put in place the conditions upon which to win. There is no enthusiasm for Labour, and as their policies come under scrutiny, there'll be even less.
Our information is that you're going to lose 600 or more seats tonight.
Yeah, well, that's quite an interesting figure. It's rather less than we lost a year before the last election, and rather less than we lost a year before the election before that. It's not surprising if you think what happened in 1992 when we won something of that order of seats, not quite as many, but we had a huge gain in 1992 because the poll came just after the general election and the electorate confirmed what they'd done in the general election campaign. It was inevitable we wouldn't do well this year against that background where we were fighting those seats. But the test that I think those who are interested in what's actually happening out there is going to apply is what does this compare with last year? And there you see that the recovery, which is in its early stages, which the opinion polls and local government by-elections have shown, has now been confirmed by this local government test, albeit in a low turnout. If I was the Labour Party, I'd be very worried by that low turnout.
Mr. Heseltine, this week has seen a lot of speculation about the leadership of the Tory party, more divisions over Europe. Is there anything that the Tory party should do, either about the leadership or about the policies it's pursuing between now and when it faces the voters in full and on a 75% turnout?
Yeah, I think that there is one absolutely crucial point, that the Tory party must understand that although it has arguments about Europe, I mean all parties have got arguments about Europe, what we mustn't do is to allow the apparent disagreement within the party to cloud the fact that all of us recognise that Labour in government, with its European policies, would be anathema to the journalists and newspapers who are worried about Europe, to the Tory party who are worried about the over-centralisation of power. If we want to stop those things, the only party that will do it is the Conservative Party, and we must not allow internal divisions to weaken our attack upon the Labour Party.
And do you rule out the possibility of ever yourself leading this party with all the charisma that people find attractive in you and many of your Tory party supporters want to see?
You're too seasoned a campaigner to believe in all that sort of stuff. You've never had this discussion so many times and you know my views about it.
It's always very enjoyable.
My job, well, it's always very enjoyable. You are a very enjoyable fellow. But it doesn't add to the science of politics. The fact of the matter is John Major is going to win the next election and I'm going to help him to do it.
And as far as you're concerned, apart from the Tory party uniting, no alteration in policy. You're just going to plug on exactly as you are in the hope that things will get better.
I don't think that it's quite as simple as that. There's no doubt about it that we have had some extremely difficult issues to deal with. First of all, the recession which destroyed virtually every government in countries of our sort with the exception of Chancellor Cole and ourselves. So that's been extremely difficult. We had to take some very tough decisions. Secondly, we've had, for example, in the clouding of this local government campaign, this immensely difficult political issue of the beef crisis. I've never seen such a difficult issue, and I haven't the slightest doubt that people have worried about what we should be doing. They've got conflicting messages about the options open to us, all these sort of things. Let's be frank about it. Very difficult, very stretching political issue. But despite that, you've seen us come through with a level of support which is at the top end of expectations, judging on our public opinion poll position.
Mr. Heseltine, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Do you want a brief comment on that, Tony King?
One thing I think people ought to be bearing in mind as the evening goes on is that the early signs are that in those seats in those districts and wards in which the Labour Party has a good chance of winning, people are swinging to Labour. In Lib Dem target seats, likewise. This is important in terms of what's going to happen.
Okay. Let's now go to those part of the countries who voted today to see their results in more detail.
Well, with many of the counts still underway, it's already proving to be a damaging night for the Conservatives here in the southeast. For the first time since it was formed, the Tories have lost control of Runnymede in Surrey. In Oxford and Harlow, the Conservatives have been wiped out. They don't have a single councillor. Labour has taken 2 councils, Basildon in Essex and Hertsmere in Hertfordshire. They were previously under no overall control. The Liberal Democrats are also celebrating after taking control of Tunbridge Wells in Kent. We start tonight at Runnymede in Surrey, where the Conservatives, as I said, have lost overall control for the first time since 1974. Our reporter at Runnymede is Sarah Morris.
Well, the declarations here at Runnymede are still taking place. As you've just heard, the Conservatives have run this council since 1974, but not anymore. Labour have made significant gains here. They've taken the wards of Hythe and Englefield Green West and also Chertsey St Anne's. I'm joined by the Conservative leader, Howard Langley, who has in fact retained his seat, we've just heard. Mr Langley, were people voting on national or local issues, do you think?
Clearly there was a large national input into the way that people decided to vote. On the doorstep, they were telling us quite clearly that they liked the way that Runnymede was run. What is, as far as I'm concerned, very cheering is the fact that our vote has significantly increased on last year and Labour's has shrunk, as it did in fact the year before. So the reason that we lost is basically because we're comparing what happened 4 years ago. We're doing better than we did last year, and that was better than we did the year before. And we've won more seats this year than we did last year, and we won more seats last year than we did the year before.
But you still needed to hang on to 9 seats to keep overall control. You haven't managed to do that, have you?
No, we're 1 short.
All right, thank you very much. Back to you, Tim.
Well, there have been Tory wipeouts so far tonight in Stevenage, in Harlow and in Oxford. Our reporter in Oxford is Jackie Bartley.
Well, we've had a very interesting night here at Oxford City Council. We've actually seen the 4 remaining Tory councillors on the council lose their seats, which means we've had a Tory wipeout here. Also, the Liberal Democrats have gained in 2 very important areas in John Patton's constituency. We'll be speaking to them in a moment. But first of all, Queenie Hamilton, you've been a councillor for 25 years. How are you feeling this evening from the Tories?
Very, very sad indeed, but you can't fight the political issues all the time. And I'm particularly sad in losing Graham Jones. He's a very good councillor for that area.
Do you blame the government that the Conservatives have actually lost here tonight?
I'm afraid I do, yes, I do.
Dr Evan Harris, you are the PPC for John Patton's constituency, for the Liberal Democrats. What's your reaction to what's gone on here tonight?
Well, I'm very pleased tonight, not only that we have 2 more seats on the City Council, but it shows that when the Conservatives are losing seats in marginal constituencies like this, it's the Liberal Democrats that are gaining. We're a very good second in this constituency, and this shows that Labour is not gaining in these areas and many others in the South East.
Dr Evan Harris, Queenie Hamilton, thank you very much. And I must just add before we go that the Green Party gained another seat on the City Council, which means it's now able to form a group, and I believe the first city in the country to be able to do so. Jackie Bartley, handing back to Tim in the studio.
Thanks, Jackie, where I'm joined by our resident expert here in the South East, Tony Travers from the London School of Economics. There's a lot of spin being put on everything already, Tony. People are talking about comparisons with 1992, comparisons with 1995, as we heard there from Runnymede. What do your instincts tell you so far? How badly are the Tories doing in the South East?
They are doing pretty badly, and probably about as badly as they did last year, in fact. At the end of the national programme a moment ago, Tony King made the point that there are people voting against the Conservatives for the Liberal Democrats in some places, for Labour elsewhere. The South East is a good test of that, because you've got places where the Liberal Democrats are second to the Conservatives, elsewhere where Labour are, and people are voting for both Labour and the Liberal Democrats against the Conservatives. We've got one interesting result, really interesting result, due to come in from Charwell a little later on, which we must watch, because that's one which, if the Conservatives find themselves in difficulty there, and we could then see a result that was as bad as it were this year as it was last year.
Right, so we're waiting for Charwell. So far, though, the Tories will say any improvement on 95 is good news.
Yes, the Conservatives are undoubtedly comparing this year, 1996, with last year, 1995, whereas, of course, these particular elections, were last fought in 1992. So Conservatives are doing badly against 1992, but they want to say that in terms of the share of the vote that they're getting, they're doing better than last year, which was a very bad year. Difficult thing to get to grips on, but that's why we've got really these two different baselines to compare with.
Issues we'll come back to shortly. Thank you, Tony. We're going next to Hertsmere in Hertfordshire, where our reporter is Sarah Harris. Sarah.
Well, as a result of Labour's 4 gains here at Hertsmere Borough Council in Hertfordshire, Labour have gained overall control for the first time in the council's history. If I can turn to you first of all, the Labour leader, Brian Stanley, what's your reaction?
Well, of course, a magnificent result. As you say, the first time that Labour has had control in Hertsmere, and we are going to use it to change the face of Hertsmere for the better. We shall keep our promises, and it's as a result of the fact that Labour councillors have given such good service wherever they've been that this result has been achieved tonight. Secondly, of course, it must reflect the division and the weakness of the present Conservative government, and it bodes well for a Labour government as soon as the Prime Minister's got the courage to stand.
The Conservative leader, Peter Riches, then this is deep in the heart of rural Hertfordshire. It must really strike a blow now for the Conservatives to get a result like this.
I think we're disappointed. It's always disappointing to lose. But I think that we did win a seat from Labour. And I also have noted that the Labour majorities in all of the wards was really comparatively small.
You did lose 7 seats here tonight.
That is right. And that's disappointing because we lost some extremely good councillors, and I think that's always sad.
Now, Tunbridge Wells in Kent, once a Tory stronghold, has fallen to the Liberal Democrats. On the phone now from Tunbridge Wells is our reporter Kate Stevens. Kate, what has the vote revealed there tonight?
Well, it's revealed that it's a night of celebration for the Liberal Democrats. They've actually made 4 gains, which means that they now have overall control of the council, which once considered Tory heartland is quite significant. The Tories overall lost 4 seats, 4 to the Liberal Democrats and 1 to the Labour, so it's been a glum night for the Conservatives here.
Did this go against Conservative expectations, Kate? Because everybody was talking about Tunbridge Wells being lost, weren't they?
Officially, the Conservatives have said they've expected it, that they've expected the Liberal Democrats to do well. In the neighbouring councils, the Liberal Democrats have been marching forward. They control 2 councils nearby, and the Conservatives expected to lose overall control tonight.
Kate, thank you. We're going now to Wokingham Live, where the Conservatives have been kept in power by just 1 independent Tory. The Liberal Democrats need 2 seats to win control. Our reporter at Wokingham is Paul Kenyon.
Good evening from Wokingham. As you say, it is on a knife edge here. The situation before today was 26 all. That's 26 to the Conservatives, 26 to the Liberal Democrats, no Labour, and 2 independents, one of those an independent Conservative. The situation still hangs in the balance this evening. Despite the Liberal Democrats saying only yesterday they thought that they were certain of at least 6 seats from the Conservatives and therefore taking control of the council, it looks now as though it's not going to be quite that good a win, if indeed it is a win. So far, they've gained 2 from the Conservatives, but the Conservatives have gained 1 back from the Lib Dems. So the situation at the moment is the Lib Dems still need 2 more seats to take overall control. The guesses from people on the floor here, they'll probably just sneak through, but not with the kind of majority they were hoping to. It's certainly not been a whitewash.
Paul, thank you. Let's go back to Tony Travers. The one place we haven't been to yet, Tony, is Basildon, home of Essex man and all that, as we always say. The Tories have just avoided a wipeout there. How significant is that in the overall political scheme of things, looking ahead to the next general election?
I think it will be seen as significant that they've managed to hold on just about to avoid that kind of wipeout we've seen elsewhere. And Basildon has this enormously symbolic importance, as you say. It was seen after the last election as being the first place where the Conservatives at the last election could see that they were going to win, ever since it's had this sort of emblematic importance. And I think that the Conservatives feel there, with some justification, they haven't done quite as badly as they feared they might. And that's the whole flavour of some of the results coming in from around the country this evening. But I think in the South East, it does look as if there is tactical voting, and it's not so good for the Conservatives overall.
Tony, thank you. We'll talk to you again a little later on this evening. The Tories have lost control in Runnymede, They've been wiped out in Harlow, Oxford and in Stevenage.
Well, welcome back to our main local election studio here in London. Before we go any further, let's have a look. We've had some more results in from key wards at how the overall picture is looking. Peter, can you give us that?
Yes, I can, David. I can indeed. Here the change from the local elections in 1995. This is the local elections last year when the Tories were doing very badly. The change on those local elections is 3% up for the Conservatives, 3% down for Labour. The change on the local elections, of course, in 1992 is a huge gain for Labour and a huge drop for the Conservatives. But out of those two changes, we can get this figure, this estimated figure, for the national share of the vote. If all those patterns of change were reflected all over the country, we estimate the national vote in this local election would have been 43% Labour, Conservatives on 28%, the Liberal Democrats on 24%.
43, 28, 24. I'm joined now, I hope, by John Redwood, the man who said no change, no chance. No change in the leadership, no chance for the Tories. It looks as though you were a prophet, Mr. Redwood.
I hope not. I'm pleased, like the other Conservative colleagues who've spoken, that our share of the vote is up and Labour's is down compared with last year. But I'm very sad that a lot of good councillors and Conservative candidates have lost their seats. And from all the work I did on doorsteps, there are still worries and concerns out there that electors have about the government and its policies, which we must put right in the months ahead before we go into a general election.
Well, what would you specify as things that must be put right in the short time you have?
Well, I think the people are very worried about three big issues at the moment. Firstly, health. They want reassurance that there are going to be enough beds and enough hospitals kept open to provide a really first-class service. Secondly, there are still a lot of worries about law and order. I think people recognise that we have a Home Secretary who is battling valiantly to improve the position, but they're impatient for more results. And thirdly, the background of the last 2 weeks has seen a lot of concern about European issues. People are very worried by the impact that the European community has had on our beef industry and our fishing industry, and they would like to see the government develop a stronger policy towards that, to get some of our entitlements back in the fishing industry, and of course to lift the beef ban.
This is a fairly devastating critique of the performance of John Major when you say that the NHS, law and order, Europe are all going wrong.
I'm saying that we can do better in each of those areas, and that is what the electorate want us to do. That was what they were telling me on the doorsteps, and I think my Conservative colleagues would agree that it's very good that we're up on last year. It is very good that a political recovery is clearly underway, but I'm sure my colleagues are as impatient as I am to get that recovery speeding up in good time for the general election. And I think it is important that all those of us who've been on doorsteps and have listened to what people have had to say then come back and say, look, these are the things that people would like progress on. I also believe that the Labour Party would make a worse mess in each of those areas. But why? I think Labour would be particularly unsuited to tackling the problems in Europe because they have no wish to negotiate firmly with our partners.
Where is the failure, though? Is it a failure of leadership? What is it that's wrong with the Tory party?
Well, I've just told you what people would like us to do.
No,
next.
I know you've said that, but you've been in office for 17 years.
I don't think I want to go back over the past and look at what has gone wrong in the public's eyes. I don't think that helps very much. I think what does matter is what we do next, and that's what the public are going to be asking. The other thing I did detect on the doorsteps I visited, mainly in Wokingham, was a growing scepticism about Labour. People do realise that the sums don't add up. They do realise that Labour wouldn't stand up for Britain's interests in Europe with any strength or fortitude. They are becoming very suspicious of whether Mr. Blair can keep the lid on all the other pressures and views within his party. So there's a lot to work on for the Conservatives in the run-up to the general election. We must get over a very positive message that we can do better and that we have answers to the present problems, but we also need to get across just how dangerous Labour would be in power.
Would you like to fight this in Cabinet, Mr. Redwood?
I will do what the Prime Minister wishes. The Prime Minister has made it quite clear that he doesn't want a Cabinet reshuffle, and the Prime Minister must choose his team. He has chosen his team. I will support the government when they're doing good things. I will come up with constructive suggestions when I'm impatient for us to make more progress.
Would you agree that the distance between the Tories and victory is as large as it can ever have been 12 months before a general election on the figures that we've got tonight of the way people voted?
Well, I haven't got all the history in front of me, but I do think there is still a sizable gap there which we need to narrow very rapidly, and that's what I want us to do. It is very encouraging that there's been a 6-point swing, Labour losing 3 and us gaining 3 since last year. We need more of that in order to go into the general election with good chances, and that's what I want to see happen.
Tony King is sitting here listening to you. Do you accept the argument that Mr. Edwards putting, or the gloss he's putting on the way things have happened?
One of the things that puzzles me about the way Conservative spokesmen are talking tonight is that they're talking in a rather depressed way, but also a rather bland way, and are certainly smoothing over one of the most obvious facts about the Conservative Party and the Conservative government at the moment, which is that it is one of the most deeply divided governments in British political history. At the moment, only 10% of people think that the Tory party is a united party, and that is clearly something the Tories have got to address, but it's not at all clear how.
What do you say to that, Mr. Edward?
Well, I think it is very important that the Cabinet do sing from the same song sheet and are clearly happy with the policies they're putting forward, and that is something which they must ensure over the year ahead.
But what about the songs that the backbenchers sing?
Well, I don't think that matters so much. The important thing is that the Cabinet has to show solidarity and unity and a strong sense of purpose, and then I think backbench loyalty grows as there is a strong sense of conviction and direction.
Robin Oakley, do you agree with that?
Well, not altogether. And it's surely the great danger for the Tory party at the moment is this public impression that the party is bitterly divided. And I notice it was David Evans, who was John Redwood's campaign manager in the leadership election last year, who said last week it's got to the stage where it's every man for himself. And that is the way the Tory party is beginning to behave. It's lost coherence, it's lost the old loyalty which used to maintain it as a party of power.
John Redwood?
Well, loyalty is an important virtue, and I think loyalty is earned by the leadership, by the Cabinet, setting out policies that backbenchers broadly like and giving a strong sense of direction. That's what I want to see over the year ahead. I trust that the government will come forward with new interesting departures in health, in education, in law and order, and that they will tackle these very difficult European problems. I think they will find the party unites very quickly behind a strong stance on the beef crisis or the fishing crisis. You saw this week in the House an awful lot of MPs urging the government to take stronger action. I hope the government does, and I think they will find that backbenchers will be cheering such action.
John Redwood, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I should just point out that when he said the swing was 6%, I think it's 3%.
He should have divided 6 by 2.
Yes, the 3% swing. Well, now, we're now joined by BBC viewers in Scotland. Welcome to these English elections, I'm afraid. One by-election, I believe, in Scotland only. But needless to say, what's going on in England tonight will give quite a good indication, or as according to some of our experts and our politicians here, is giving quite a good indication of the state of politics in the country as a whole and what might happen at a general election. Let me just show you, for the benefit of those of you who've just joined us, what the figures are we have so far. We've got 150 councils to come in tonight, and we've had 98 of them, very nearly 100. And so far, Labour have gained control of 8. They're standing at 59. There are 13 fewer under no overall control, with no party with a majority to rule. The Liberal Democrats are up 4 with 16 altogether, and the Conservatives, no change, they have 3. I think that actually should be 1 down because they lost Runnymede, so there's a slight error there. Let's go on to the councillors and see what's happened there. We've had 1,600 or so of the 3,000 in, and the key figure are the ones on the right-hand side there, which much is made of. Labour on these seats that were elected tonight, so far nearly up to the 1,000 mark, up 304. The Liberal Democrats are up 92. The Conservatives are down 364. Independents down 13, others down 19, and 2 Greens have taken their seats. The gains for Labour in the following councils: Basildon, Trafford, Hertsmere, Oldham, Wyre Forest, Rochdale, and Charwell, which includes Banbury, where the big cattle market is, and Peterborough, that may be significant in that, and Peterborough. Liberal Democrats have gained control in Tunbridge Wells, in Hastings, in Sussex, in West Lindsey, in Woking, and because of a by-election, one by-election in North Somerset, have taken North Somerset. And the Conservative lost there in Runnymede. Conservatives are holding on, however, in Macclesfield and Huntingdonshire. In fact, in Huntingdonshire, I believe they have made two net gains. So in John Major's area, they're not doing so badly. The Conservatives have been wiped out, that's to say, now have no councillors at all in Oxford, Stevenage, Lincoln, Wigan, Harlow, Hastings, in Newcastle, in Manchester, in Salford, and in Tamworth. So that's how things stand, and at that point we join the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, John Prescott, who is at Labour Party headquarters. Mr. Prescott, thanks. I gather you had a power cut or a power blackout, your way of celebrating this night, but thank you for joining us now.
Yes, we're really excited down here. These are the things that happen, but we get over those kind of problems and get stuck in, and that's what's happening. Labour's doing well tonight.
Now, what is your reaction to the results so far? We've heard a lot from the Conservatives about how we should ignore this year's elections because local elections don't tell us anything about your prospects in a general election. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think probably, listening to Mr. Redwood there, it's very clear, no change, no chance. And I think that's what he was saying and what Mr. Heseltine's saying. And it's quite clear from this that they do see a very bad result for the Tory party. And for suggesting perhaps a couple of percentage increase in their share of the poll this year is higher than last year, it will still be about their second worst result. Only 14 councils. And they, as you said, are being wiped out in many councils. The other significant factor, I think, and important to Labour, of course, is that we're winning in those very key areas that we have to win, the ones that we've identified as the key seats to win in. For example, the areas like Lincoln, Harlow, Basildon, Rochdale, Chorley, Oldham, Gloucester. These are very good areas for Labour to be winning in indeed. And two particularly pleasing to me, Basildon, of course, which is very good to see that we've won there, and Peterborough. Both of them have MPs who've chickened out on their constituency, Mr. Malwini and Mr. Amos, who've both gone to other constituencies because they believe, quite different to Mr. Heseltine, that in fact the government's record is unpopular, and in the local elections those results will be reflected in a general election.
So is this nothing to do with Labour's running of local councils, but all to do with the government's unpopularity at Westminster?
Well, we fought on our record, of course, and we meant to in all those areas. Our press conferences, people were attending, could see that we put Labour's record. Indeed, Tories only have 14 councils, so they can't have much of a record to put forward, have they? Thousands of their councillors have gone. And again, Mr. Heseltine and Mr. Redwood probably saying sorry to thousands of Tory councillors who've lost their seat, no doubt because they're hoping that they may be assisting them in the coming leadership race if Mr. Major feels he's got to go after such disastrous results.
Well, now, it may be a good night for you tonight, but say Labour wins the general election and we're back in the local council elections the year after that. You've got all kinds of plans for local councils, haven't you, to do the opposite, really, of what the Tories have done. You're going to give up on the capping. You're going to allow them to have much more power than they have at the moment. You're not going to insist that they do competitive tendering. Aren't local councils, Labour-held local councils, going to turn out to be what dare I call old Labour, once Labour is in office, if it gets there?
Now, they'll be wanting to put across decent public services. And where we've made the criticism of the Tory party, it is about improving those quality of services. And despite the many difficulties, many of those Labour councils have been winning awards and charter marks, if you like, from the Tory party for the quality of those services. We are concerned to see good quality services, and we've produced whole reams of evidence to show how Labour have been producing it, despite having a central government such as the Tory party highly hostile to their activities.
Well, Mr. Prescott, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I'm glad the lights came on. Right, Peter, we've been talking so far about wards. We have, of course, got another way of looking at this through the constituencies that at the next election people are going to be voting on.